Thanks for joining us for the tips and tricks for a successful remote internship. We've been lucky enough to be joined by two students who've had experience doing remote internships and managing projects remotely. They participated with several other people who we reached out to, alumni and students, in creating a tips for a successful remote internship tip sheet, which I sent out to everybody who registered for this event just a few minutes ago. If you're logging in right now, I will send it, and you didn't register a few minutes before the event, I will send you the tip sheet after the event. I've asked everybody to mute their microphones, and if you have any questions, put them in the chat, and I will pass them on to our speakers. We're going to ask each speaker to introduce themselves and then spend just 3 to 5 minutes with their top 3 tips, and maybe a little bit of some anecdotes from stuff they've already done, and then mostly open it up for questions from the folks who are joining us today. So with that, Gabriela, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, so my name is Gabriela. I am a senior here at Brown studying Health and Human Bio. Just finished finals, so I don't know if I'm a senior anymore, which is weird. I have been involved remotely with a nonprofit organization after the summer of my sophomore year. I had interned with them in person and then kind of stayed on to work on a couple projects for them ever since then. And that has included remote work over the summer while I was doing another in-person internship in another city. And yeah, so I've done a wide range of like nonprofit management and communication work, all remotely. Very small organization, so a lot of like active communication with my supervisors. And I guess my 3 main tips would be: 1, keeping a to-do list nearby during any and all meetings, just because I find that in person, it's easy for someone to remind you if they've asked you to do something, but a lot of things get thrown out like during conversations or Zoom meetings or whatever that can be kind of hard to keep track of. So just having like a little Post-it note or book that you write your to-do list or anything that people bring up during a meeting can be really useful. My second one is be clear about when you'll be available to work. So like if you are working 9 to 5, make it super clear that like after 5 in your time zone, you aren't going to be available to work, or like whatever that schedule is for you, making it super clear. And that way people will know like when to receive your projects, when they'll be receiving emails from you, when they, like if they follow up with you about something, like why it might take you a couple bit more hours to respond, especially if there's a time difference, like that can be really important. And then the third kind of big tip is double checking which modes of communication are like normally used in the company or like your supervisor feels comfortable with. Since I work at a pretty small nonprofit, really small nonprofit, if there's something like really urgent, I know that I can text my supervisor, but I also know that in other kind of companies that's not necessarily appropriate. I also know that like my supervisor prefers if I email her over texting her. So if it's not something urgent, then I will always go with an email. Other companies use like Slack and things like that, but there's always like an etiquette that goes around that. That's really important to know when you're first stepping in. Yeah. All
right. And Gabriela, before we move on with Charlene, can I ask you, and it was Mission Cure, correct?
Yeah.
Had Mission Cure had experience with remote interns before, or were you kind of helping them figure out how to do this effectively as you went, since that's going to be the experience for a lot of students this summer?
So a little bit of both. Mission Cure has like consultants that work remotely. And so they like have experience, like they had experience managing people remotely. I've definitely like worked the longest period of time with them that they've had to deal with anyone remotely. So there have been a couple of things that I've like helped them figure along in the way. And I know this summer, like we're having remote interns as well. And so I'm also trying to like make sure that that like remote internship experience like uses a lot of the learnings that I've experienced in that.
All right, excellent. And then before we open it up for questions, I think I saw a couple people join us. Again, please folks keep your mics muted. And if you have any questions, put them in the chat. But first we're gonna have Charlene introduce herself and tell us her top 3 tips.
Awesome. Hi everyone, I'm Charlene, also a senior like Gabriela. I study applied math, computer science, and economics. My first remote internship was in sophomore year. It was a half remote, half in-person one. And I was working with a 12-hour time zone differences. So imagining working pretty early and late hours and trying to squeeze in as much as I could within the FaceTime I had before I go to bed. And then after that, I'm working with a nonprofit in the San Francisco Bay Area, working to fight coronavirus for the hospitals, and I'm doing product management for them currently. After graduation, I will be a product manager at Google, which announced to work from home till the end of the year. So I'm going to be working from home entirely 2020, and that will be a really fun experience to have, I guess. And as for the top 3 tips, similar to Gabriela, having a clear expectation is so important. And in addition to like work hours, I think it's also important to have successes and what's the appropriate like mode of communication, what is the break you're going to have for yourself during the day. Because from my experiences, it's so easy to work overtime and burn out because no one is supervising you. So you will be like, oh, maybe I should work even more. Maybe I should work 8 hours. But during, if you're in the office, 8 hours is with chit chats, like breaks, and a bunch of different things, right? So if you want to do the same amount of work, maybe you only need 5 hours at a day, and that's totally fine. You should take as much rest as you needed, because when you burn out, there's no one next to you that you could talk to. So mental health is super important to start with. And then the second one is try to lean into your coworkers, because sometimes when I was working with my first remote internship, my manager was pretty busy. He was work from home sometime as well. He was out of office for a week, and I really need someone to guide me. So I managed to find the peers to work with so they can know me as a person and then tell my manager what I have been doing when he's away. And I think that managing expectation thing also applies to people who are not their direct team, because people in a small startup or smaller organization will talk to each other, even though it's on email chain, other like Zoom meetup or Slack, right? You want to make sure that your presence is there because they don't see you. And it's really easy to forget you because you're not in the office. And I guess the third and final tip is trying to prioritize video chat over written communication, because a lot of important information is lost when you send out a text. It's hard to see the tone. You don't know what people are feeling. It may be a really nice feedback, but it could be read really harsh. So if you could get 5 minutes to talk on Zoom, or like 15 minutes, try to do that after you have like 2 or 3 back and forth. Because if you have like more than 2, it's clearly something is like mistaken and you need to talk in person. And that's really fast. Like 5 minutes could solve so many things. So I would recommend like having a clear expectation, lean into your coworkers, and try to write, not try to write, but try to talk whenever possible.
And Charlene, I know just from a few conversations I've had the last few weeks, a number of students are going to be in the boat that you are in of huge time difference. Can you add just one little bit? Maybe you talked in the second one about leaning into your coworkers. Can you talk a little bit about how you might have done that, even though you were trying to squeeze in, as you said earlier, stuff in the beginning of the day, stuff at the end of the day, with that huge time difference?
Yeah, so when I was working, I think 2 summers ago, most of the company meetings important meetings are later in the day, right? So that means that you're going to miss them. I ended up finding a mentor who was a good friend to the decision maker. So she could help me change the time because they want to be more inclusive, but people may not know that people are like not in the office. So trying to approach people in the main circle that could adjust the decisions, announcement, so that you could be a part of it. You don't want to change your sleeping time because like that's essential. You want to make sure that the company is mindful, is inclusive, and people know that you're being there remotely contributing as much as you are in the office. And the other thing is, I don't know if everyone has like the open workspace. Like when I was working, there's always a Google Calendar where you can see other people's like agenda, right? So I would always put up all the time I have, including my eating time, my sleeping time, and other stuff. So people wouldn't overschedule the time that I need to be taking care of myself. So, and I think that this will be more often because we're having so many more work from home and people are over different time zone, right? So you want to check, you're also being mindful for other people's schedule. You don't want to schedule time when they're like really late at night, they're with their family. So that's a two bilateral thing that I want to mention.
All right. I did want both the speakers to kick things off, but mostly I wanted everybody who is joining us today to have a chance to ask questions of people who've navigated this before, because I'm guessing most of you either have or are angling to get some remote internships or remote jobs this summer. So please type in some questions in the chat. I'll pass them along to the speakers, and we'll go from there. So Charlene, while I'm waiting for things to come in through the chat, so you don't recommend having a fake background to make it look like I'm in the same time zone as you? You don't think that's a good idea?
People value authenticity so much. And even though it's like something that's not good, it's better than like other things. That's my experiences.
Awesome. So we have a question, when communicating about availabilities, how flexible should I be? And I'm guessing this is partly, this could be somebody who's also thinking a little bit about different time zones, potentially. Either one of you, when things have kind of butted against your availability and what the employer is asking, how have you navigated? How have you managed that in the past?
I think it's, at least in my experience, the biggest thing was like finding my own priorities. Like I've worked while like doing classes, and I've worked while doing like another in-person internship, and being super transparent with them and saying, hey, like it's finals period right now. I'm only going to be available, like I need these 3 days where I can't do anything, but I will be available starting like on this day at this time. If you like are really transparent about the reasons why you have to set those limits, I find that like most people understand that. And especially now, I think like everyone is having to like be clear and set those limits for themselves. Even if they've worked at the company for like 10 plus years, like this is all a new experience, and everyone's setting, like figuring out the times when they can work and when they have to like step back for themselves. And you just have to like not be shy about being like, hey, I need to sleep.
So clear communication. And Charlene, here's a slight follow-up on that. If you want to keep the ball rolling on this one. One of the students said their manager sent them an email at 6 a.m. this morning, and they're both working in the same time zone. Is that student, that intern, expected to reply by 7 a.m.?
No, you're not. So, and that's the short answer. The long answer is people have different work hours. I also send emails really early, 5 to 6 a.m., but I don't expect people to reply to me. One example is that when I was working with Google last summer, I am scheduling I'm a product manager, so I have to work with team in Zurich, New York, Mountain View, and some in Asia. There are times we have to make a decision, so it will be 6 p.m., 7 p.m., some people's dinner time. it's really hard. So people will bring that up to me upfront, telling them, no, they have dinner, they couldn't do it. So what I offer is that, why don't you just send me your decision in words, and I will make sure to share that with the team. So that's that. If you change the role play, it'll be more like, if you're sleeping and if you have like things you couldn't do, just like tell them that, hey, this is the alternative. It's not optimal, but I could tell you what I want in a document or in a word, so that you can choose, do you want to change the time or have my input in words, so that people don't feel like you're just rejecting them. You're actually proposing a better solution to make the situation better.
So again, short answer, no, not expected to reply at 7 a.m. But given what you just said, probably a good idea to kind of follow up and have a conversation, just so everybody's clear. Hey, here's what I'm going to do. If I get something at 6 a.m. when I'm in to do my time, I will follow up with you then, or you and I can make a different arrangement, right?
Yeah. And one thing
Awesome.
that I would add is, because you want to over communicate to make up for the loss of like being present physically, right? So one thing is to send up either daily or weekly write-ups of what you had done to your manager and the related team. So what I've been doing is that I send it to around 40 people I work with, my manager, my manager's manager, so that people know what I have been doing in terms of project, people, and myself. Like things that I do, like stand-up comedy, like cooking, I would include all of them in a weekly email, so people have that like human touch of like, hey, this girl is doing this, even though we haven't been able to talk for the past few weeks. So that like managing expectation is really, really important if you work in a large place like Google or like other places.
All right, excellent. Gabriela, if I, this actually I think applies because of how you were managing the Mission Cure internship. If we're working 2 remote internships, people will be doing some of that this summer. How would you go about establishing availability in order to balance them?
I think like scheduling yourself time blocks for each internship, and telling like each internship, be like, I'm also working at this like organization, and for that reason, like these are the hours that I will be available, and making sure that like you don't allow those two like those two works, those two internships to mix. So let's say you schedule like all day Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday for one internship, and then all day like Thursday, Friday. You make sure that like whatever internship is scheduled for that moment is really the one that you're prioritizing and like paying attention to. I think something that's really hard is when there's like a deadline coming up for one internship and a deadline coming up for the other, or like you're supposed to be spending time with the other one, and just like that is something that can come up. And so it's again like super important to be actively communicating and like setting yourself time, like being aware of when your deadlines might come, and like planning ahead for that. Scheduling for yourself is like, it kind of sounds ridiculous because you're like, oh, I'm at home, why do I need to schedule like every second of my day? But when you're trying to juggle 2 positions that are like, that require you to do stuff and like are giving you responsibilities, it's important to be able to like designate time to those.
So establishing either days when you'll do one internship or the other, or parts of days, and then maybe planning even 2 weeks out for deadlines that you can see coming, so you can be aware, work around them with the employer as you're going forward. Yeah.
And even like, if you have a chance to like talk about this with your supervisors and things like that, asking them like what times would they prefer you're available. If like if one of them has a lot of meetings, like Charlene was saying, like a lot of meetings in the afternoon, maybe it's important that you prioritize being available for that internship in the afternoons, and then the other internship in the morning, since they have like less face-to-face communication in the afternoons. So if you like are able to have that conversation at the start, it could be really useful to help plan that.
And then Charlene, for you, if you have questions and you're not sure about what you're doing, how would you recommend reaching out? And I know a lot of people get worried about being kind of burdensome or too needy, but what would you recommend, especially early on in reaching out when you haven't kind of established how that's going to work?
Yeah, I was lucky that my manager is really mindful about that. So he and I have a weekly question session that's in addition to the one-on-one. It's for all the questions I've had, and he will just answer anything. Having that is really important, but if you're not comfortable like telling your manager to like have an extra hour for you every week, maybe try asking him what's the best method for communication when you ask questions. Should you ask in group chat, but that may embarrass the team or him, I don't know. Or maybe you could ask in messages, like private messages. And you can also find some trusted advisors from the company that is more senior in terms of like the years they have worked there, and they know about your project really well. And getting to know that person as a friend, or like someone you trust them, they trust you, is important. So then you can just ask them really dumb questions you think, and they will be more than happy to help you. Because like, I thought my question is dumb, but then it's the part that the team has never been thought about before, right? We always thought our questions are dumb, but they're not. You're asking to help them clarify things that haven't been clarified. So you're helping the team to gain more clarity so they could achieve even more goals.
Right. And I think one of the key things I heard there is you talked earlier about all the different channels that there are available to you when you're interacting with an employer remotely, making it really clear with your supervisor which one they prefer. You ask these kind of quick, I don't know what's going on guidance questions. Somebody really liked your idea of sending a weekly progress email. Is that something that was recommended to you that you do, or is that something you kind of offered and told the employer, hey, I'd like to do this, would this work for you?
Yeah, so the story is actually quite funny. I started just because I want to let my manager, who is pretty busy, know what I'm doing. And then he's like, oh, I love this. Could you send it to the team? So I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of awkward. I don't know them, but I will CC them. And then the team liked it, and they were like, could you send it to the entire org? I was like, that's 500 people. Like, do I want to be an extra like a pass on people's email box? And then there's like around 4 to 5 directors like come to me and say like, could you please like send it to us? I was like, okay. So it's like baby step that I took, right? I tested with my manager, one person, and then I tested with my team, 20 people, and then more. You can see that as a newsletter, right? So if people are sending newsletter across the org, they want to see some fun things that interns are doing, or people who have a fresh perspective. So you're doing them a favor by sharing your perspective and your experiences, because people are generally like not open to sharing what they're doing privately in many corporates. So if that's a allowed behavior and you're comfortable sharing, like just do it. You shouldn't second guess yourself. Like, are you being annoying? No, you're not.
So as it got sent to more people, did you have to contract out to get better graphics and animation and everything to just make it slicker, or do you just?
We're a tech company, so people are pretty generous about the lack of design. I'm not a designer. I made it a Google Doc though, so I made it really upfront that it's a draft. So if there's any inappropriate things, please give me feedback. I want to learn from you. So if I have like some shout outs that didn't include one team members, they'll be like, oh, you should include this person, right? So that's a good lesson that I just like got even more feedback because I'm doing this extra thing. And if you have time, I would actually recommend trying things that the job doesn't allow you to do when you're doing in the office, right? Because you have more time. And then that extra feedback is so important. I think that's really what career taught me, is the direct thing you got from experienced people to help you grow even faster. So you always want to shorten the feedback. We'll either do like daily writing, weekly standouts, or other form of presentations.
Got it. And I've got looks like 3 more questions. Would you guys be willing to stay on an extra 5 minutes or so? Excellent. Okay, so Gabriela, what if I feel like I don't have much to do? So how do I go about how do I deal with that?
I think that's a problem that like even is even challenging in in-person internships. And I think similar answer applies, where it's all about like being proactive. And if you really like you've reached out to your supervisor, sent them an email, been like, hey, I have a lot of free time. I was wondering if like you have any projects or anything else that I can help with. And they like don't seem to have anything else for you. I found that like proposing my own ideas and being like during weekly one-on-ones or being like, hey, can we schedule like a quick 10-minute Zoom call today? And like proposing my own idea for a project. Like Charlene said, like you are a fresh face, you have new ideas that most likely haven't been thought of in the organization before. And like they might shoot you down and be like, oh no, we've already tried that, or we've already done that, or we're not interested in having you do that. But even just showing that like you have time, have the initiative to like think about something that you want to do, have the passion behind like putting together some sort of like brief 5-minute spiel on like what you think you could do, that can really help you gain trust with like an employer who like doesn't see you in person, to be like, oh, like this is someone that I can actually delegate more tasks to because they're clearly on top of like everything they need to do.
And would you wait for a couple of weeks into the internship before using the proposing new ideas strategy, or
No.
do you feel like comfortable doing that early?
I mean, I would say as soon as possible.
Okay.
I think it depends on the like company and the company culture and like what type of internship it is. In my experience in like the nonprofit like sector and like healthcare, you don't really have that much time during an internship. I mean, it's only 8 weeks. So if you wait 2 weeks, you only have 6 weeks left, which might not be necessarily enough time to like see a project to completion. And that's, I guess, another thing on like the documentation of everything that you do. It's super important because during an internship, you might not finish what like this project or this bigger thing that you were planning on doing. So making sure that you document the whole like process makes it easy to like pass on then to someone else who might not have seen every step of the process since you weren't there in person.
Got it. And I didn't note this before, but the Career Lab counselors are actually working and be available all summer. If you're getting to this point and you want to kind of test out with us how to approach an employer to pitch an idea like that, definitely go into Handshake or email careerlab@brown.edu and set up an appointment with one of us. And we're happy to kind of help you get that going. Okay, so Charlene, a couple people really like the weekly report. I'm wondering, since you've shared it with so many people already, if you'd be willing to let me share it with anybody who logged in today. Send me an example and let me share it with people who logged in today. Would that be okay?
Could I could do a screen share, but like there are confidential links from Google.
Perfect.
So you could give me like 2 minutes, I can pull it up and I will share it over here.
Oh,
because like it's just I couldn't open a link, right? So but I could show the screenshot.
Got it. Sure.
I would pull it out. Give me 2 seconds. I mean 2 minutes.
And while you're doing that, here's going to be our final question, and I'll ask both of you to answer, and we'll let Gabriela answer first, because I think this one I've heard a lot too. I was super excited to move away again for my internship and felt really bummed when my internship got moved to virtual. How can I get excited again to continue working from home?
I mean, I think that's a hard question. Depending on people's like home situation, it can be hard to like stay motivated. And I think we all saw that with like learning online. I think prioritizing like meetings and having the chance to like talk to people will be important in like keeping yourself motivated, because it shows that other people are like holding you accountable and like the work that you're doing is actually having an impact or like gonna be important to what someone else is working on. And I think that like, at least for me, that's the biggest motivator, is being able to like see a final product that someone is gonna take and like do something with. And so making sure that like you talk to the people that like are also going to be working with like similar projects and things like that. Because yeah, I mean, it can be hard, and at least also now we know that like a lot of these companies are also all like virtual, like everyone's working from home. And I think like everyone's experiencing the same difficulty and like staying motivated and staying on top of their work. And so it's like all the more opportunity to reach out to coworkers who like now have time and like might not be going to happy hour after work, but might have like be totally willing to jump on like a FaceTime with you or a Zoom call with you after work.
All right. Yeah. Because in theory, that was part of the reason you were excited to be there, was because the people who were working there and the kinds of things they wanted to tackle. So, all right, great. And Charlene, other ways to get excited about the summer?
My document is ready. I think one thing for getting excited is to, if there isn't any fun stuff, like be the one to organize and plan virtual happy hours. Like either people could read the same book club, or like people could like watch the same movie, anything. Having that social bound is really important for being more effective, because people will trust you more. And being the one who takes the initiative will definitely take even more praise because you're stepping out to do so.
All right.
Yeah. Even if that's the extra project you propose, being virtual social chair.
Oh, there you go. All right.
And this is like the document. Could anyone see that?
I can. I think people can see it. Yes.
Okay, awesome. So
yes.
This is, you can ignore the highlights and project because it is not suitable, but like the people part is just like who I talk to, interesting people, like cooking is my passion at the time. Myself, I talk about like the classes I've taken, the video I watched, stuff I did. And then I started from like very early. So you can see that this is the entire long document, but I have like this in the first week. It is pretty simple, like how I ramp up, people I've met to get in touch. I talked a little bit about me, but I didn't want to go into depth until people show interest. So that's where I started. And you see that I got into way more detail in my personal stuff later in the later down the road.
All right, that's really nice. And I like your approach. You started with a couple people and then they wanted you to. All right, that's really nice. Well done. I think that's it. Let me double check here for the questions. I think that's it for the questions. Again, I want to remind everybody who logged in, if you had signed up previously, I sent you the tip sheet we all worked on. And anybody who logged in today, I will send it. So some of you will get it twice. Sorry about that. And if you have any questions as you're navigating your remote internship, please feel free to schedule an appointment through Handshake with one of the counselors or email careerlab@brown.edu. Gabriela and Charlene, thank you so much for spending the time to share this. The number of, according to Handshake, the number of remote internships went from about 2% of all the internships that were posted to about 30 or 35%. So huge increase. And I know a lot of students are going to be doing it. Thanks for sharing your experience so people can jump in and get the most out of this summer. Really appreciate you guys taking the time.
Awesome. Good luck.
Yeah.
All right.